Welcome, y'all. It's Wes with DIY Food Plot Pro. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's episode, we're talking about a big question that I get from many food plotters is, Wes, what are you planning on the farm? And I generally go into this spiel about when are you wanting to hunt? When are you wanting to target that specific buck? And we go through all the details of the different food plots that we can plant. So I'm going to put a different spin on this today, and we're going to go over the timeline of a whitetail's food sources throughout the entire year, so that we can better understand and be able to make better decisions on what food plots to plant on our farms to be able to have the maximum amount of draw and to be able to harvest more mature bucks during the hunting season. My name is Wes. I run the channel DIY Food Plot Pro. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Agronomy. I farm for a living. I've got a 1,800 acre whitetail deer hunting outfitter in Western Kentucky where we cannot bait. So we rely heavily on the food plots that I produce on this channel to hold and harvest the mature bucks that we're blessed to hunt here in Western Kentucky. A whitetail's food sources are constantly changing, especially when it gets into that later part of the year, into fall, winter, early spring. We have some significant changes right there, but in all reality, the whitetail's food source is a very diverse mix throughout the entire year. I want to start this video out by saying that I'm not just talking about the whitetails are just going to eat this plot or that plot. I'm talking about that is going to be one of their biggest influences of their diet, but they are still going to eat forbs, many weed species. They have a very diverse diet. They're not just going to hit our food plots like many folks like to believe. So let's start out in spring. What is a whitetail's main diet in the spring? Generally, spring green up. We're past that here. You can see the spring green up comes, all the buds start opening on the tips of the trees. That's a main food source for those whitetails. That's going to be woody browse, shrubs, anything young, tender plants. Something like a clover and an alfalfa are going to be phenomenal in that early part of spring because they green up so much faster. It doesn't take very many warm days before a plot of alfalfa or a plot of clover really starts greening up, and those whitetails are going to key in on that almost immediately. So as we transition over into the summer, what are deer looking for? Deer are looking for high protein food sources, okay? The bucks are growing their racks, the does are raising their fawns. They are needing large amounts of high protein in their diet. In the summertime, that's generally why you find deer in alfalfa food plots, clover food plots, soybean food plots, lab, sunflowers. All those plots are extremely high in protein. Those are plots that are phenomenal for early season hunting because of that high protein, high draw that those whitetails are seeking at that point. As summer kind of transitions to fall, there's always a spell there when the protein sources that they've been eating all summer begin to drop. It happens every single year, and if you don't believe me, all you got to do is keep one little plot out and plant it late into a high protein food source such as soybeans, sunflowers, anything like that that's high in protein. Those whitetails will hammer in the late summer. The reason for that is those plants get bigger, digestibility drops, and so does protein level. What whitetails are looking for is that constant high protein through the summer. Generally from spring green up all the way till mid to late summer, they have high protein food sources. High protein food sources typically come from new growth. So as summer goes into fall, protein sources begin to drop. Very, very key, because whitetails generally continue to prefer that high protein food source much longer than they generally can get it. So there's a little bit of a deficit there between that late summer and early fall where those whitetails are not getting the high protein levels they need to finish off growing for that year. Early in the fall, the whitetails go through a massive change, right? We have been eating greens pretty much exclusively all summer long, high protein greens. Now their diets have switched to primarily a high carb diet. Generally in September, early October, the white oak acorns are going to be the most preferred food source that you can get for a whitetail. They are absolutely phenomenal, and whitetails will absolutely draw to a white oak tree, especially when you have a woods that only has a few scattered white oaks in it. Our woods are not like this. Much harder to target a specific tree when you have hundreds of them on the farm. I have been to many farms through the consultations, through the visits, where there might only be a handful of white oak trees. When they have years that they drop heavy, those are phenomenal places to hunt because there is nothing more preferred to a whitetail than white oak acorns. They are the #1 most preferred food source. What else are they eating besides that? They're not just eating acorns, but it does take up the majority of their diet. They're also eating grains, right? So soybeans, corn, if you're in ag country, when the combines come through, that many deer start bumping out in those fields. Before they're even gone, the deer are already coming into that field to get that fresh grain, right? That's a high carb diet. Oats, winter wheat, cereal rye, they also get used heavily in that time frame. Okay, as we get into later fall, corn, soybeans, and red oak acorns pretty much dominate. The reason the red oak acorns aren't as dominant early on in the year is because of the high levels of tannic acid, okay? That is basically a preservative in that acorn. But what it does is it doesn't taste as good to them. So they generally will leave that alone. You'll generally see them start picking up on those red oak acorns either well after the white oaks are gone or a couple months after they have dropped. Generally, those levels have dropped enough that the whitetails begin to consume them at that point. And we also have our cereal grains. Those are big time for whitetails in the wintertime. If you're in a small plot of the woods, cereal grains can be the difference of having a fantastic plot and having a complete bust. Okay, so when we get into late winter, that's when food sources really change dramatically, right? Because generally, there are very few quality food sources left. The acorns have been pretty much cleaned up. All the corn, soybeans, unless you're growing a pretty good amount of acres, is completely gone. This is generally the point in time when we see that huge switch in diet to primarily woody browse, right? We're looking at close to 46% is woody browse in that later part of the wintertime. Generally, that's what's available to them. We're in those high stem count areas where there's a tremendous amount of cover and a tremendous amount of woody browse. That's what gets those deer through the winter the majority of the time. They also are going to start hitting the turnips and radishes a good bit more at that point. Generally, in my area, what I have found is January, February, maybe early March, right before spring green up, is when they really key in on those turnips and radishes plot. They will also continue to graze on the cereal grains as well. Basically, that time of the year, they are much less picky on their food sources. They'll pretty much consume what is on their landscape. But preferably wise, they're looking for woody browse, corn, soybeans, and cereal grains. Those are going to be still the most preferred food sources. So when somebody asks me, what do I plant for maximum attraction for the longest amount of time? Generally what I tell them is if you have the budget, I'm looking for something like corn with cereal grains mixed in, because that checks a large percentage of those boxes all the way through the entire season, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. If somebody doesn't have a pretty significant budget, maybe doesn't have the land to produce the corn, we're depending a good bit more on those cereal grains. They stay good. They have good attraction for a pretty good amount of time. If you need extra help setting up your farms, I've got a website set up, www.diyfoodplotpro.com. You can go there, you can click on many of my options that I have. I've got all kinds of new products that will be coming to market within the next 6 or 7 months. And I am very, very excited about that. I really appreciate each and every one of you and the support that you've given the channel. If I could help you out, I would be glad to do so. www.diyfoodplotpro.com. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Y'all smash that like and subscribe button.